let's just say you're going to want to watch, because where I have Twilight may shock some of you. Hello one, hello all, welcome to yet another Autopstream 31 on 31. This time we're doing Creatures of the Night, or the subgenre of vampire and werewolf movies. And for the first time in 31 on 31, you guys got to vote on a third of them. This is something we've been throwing around for a while. Cody kind of whispered in my ear about the idea, and I've been waiting for this. This is something that I'm genuinely excited to do between Cody LEACH, Sean Chandler, BRYAN LOMAX, and yours truly. This could be the most internationally covered 31 movies that we've had yet. A lot of different languages, a lot of subtitles this time around. I don't know what that means, but vampires, werewolves are up against each other, so why don't we get to it? Number 31. Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Hollywood tries to capitalize on tropes, and Twilight just decimated everything we knew about the vampire movie. And Walking Dead was a mainstream success on cable television, so they gambled a bit and just said, oh, if you like romantic, chaste vampires, well then you'll love Abraham Lincoln as a vampire hunter. I almost feel like you have to blame Quentin Tarantino and his retcon job in Inglourious Bastards for this what-if-ism. If you're not from America, if you're not very well familiar with Abraham Lincoln, it might be a little bit easier to take less seriously or as a joke, but Mary Elizabeth Winstead was in this, and I am quite a fan of that actress and her work. When you consider the other movies that are near the bottom here, this is saying something. I just, no thank you. I don't need a young Abraham Lincoln as a vampire hunter. Thank you. Number 30 is An American Werewolf in Paris. I guess my question for the filmmakers is why American Werewolf in Paris is just silly. Then they throw in this like eugenics vibe with the skinhead people who are trying to get rid of all the homeless people, and like that's who they're making werewolves. It's just a really odd movie, and it looks bad. The cinematography in this movie looks bad. Can you get a wide shot, like at all, ever? Lots of close-ups, not much coverage as far as showing different angles and stuff is concerned. Awkwardly, Julie Delpy is in this, doing her best. And then you have Julie Bowen. Yeah, Julie Bowen just plays a complete character of a bimbo. And considering what this movie is a follow-up to, this is a complete caricature of An American Werewolf in London. Number 29, John Carpenter's Vampires. John Carpenter is a brilliant director, but when he misses, oh my God, does he miss hard. And there's so much about this movie that I just absolutely cannot take seriously. It's almost like John Carpenter wanted to do Near Dark meets From Dusk Till Dawn. James Woods is not a badass. James Woods is perfectly cast in Scorsese's Casino as like the skeezy guy who's always got something that he's got up his sleeve. And as you'll see as we get further down this list, I'd rather watch Near Dark or From Dusk Till Dawn rather than have some interesting hybrid directed by a filmmaking giant in John Carpenter. This is not the late 70s, early 80s, though. This is James Woods in the late 90s as your badass. Ugh. The guy broke his wrists leaning on poker tables. Number 28. Here it is. Everybody calm down. It's Twilight. We have such a diverse set of movies here, and why not just the absolute swerve of everything you know about vampires in this awkward young adult love story that is about a vampire who's celibate and wants to wait for, I don't know. This movie wasn't the first, but I always felt like this one was the strongest with the blue tones and added new lore to everything you know about vampires. Just try not to think about the fact that a 100-something-year-old guy is courting a high school girl.
Graduation caps?
We matriculate a lot.
That's what I love about these high school girls, man. I get older, they stay the same age. They just don't.
Letting her save herself for him. We now know where thunder comes from in a scene that just, it feels more like a tampon or maxi pad ad than anything else. It's certainly shot like that.
It's awesome because it's discreet, it's the most compact, and it protects like a full-size tampon. Try it, trust it, play on.
But yeah, Twilight, it has fans. And then they grow up, but we're only judging the first one here. There's some value to Twilight for me, oddly enough. It's more a sadistic value than anything. I mean, I'd rather watch a Neil Breen movie than John Carpenter's Vampires, which is...
I can't believe you committed suicide. I cannot believe you committed suicide. I can't help you out of this one, Jim.
So disappointing for me to say that. Number 27 is Stakeland, a movie that I really didn't know existed until it was put on this list. There's quite a few movies on this batch of 31 that I've watched for the first time. And again, Walking Dead was a successful television series. And this felt like if you took Walking Dead, Terminator Salvation, and kind of tweaked things and threw vampires into the mix, that's what you'd have here. It was an interesting concept. It just didn't grab me. I'm curious to see if I watched it when it came out, how I'd feel about it, because, you know, we're now a decade plus removed from that surge of vampire neuterization. And this certainly by no stretch is not a neuterization. It just tries to remind you, hey, here's a different take on vampires. And what about vampires in the apocalypse? Maybe back then I would have enjoyed it more, but can we not with the apocalypse movies? Apocalypse but blank. I think I would have rathered actual steak, S-T-E-A-K, land. Although I guess that's just a farm, isn't it? Number 26, Blade Trinity. Again, actresses that I'm fond of featured quite prominently in this 31, and I really feel poorly about how I feel about some of these movies. I have never seen any of the Blade movies, and all three are being ranked. That's the other thing too. I don't think there's a movie pre-1981, I want to say, but I don't want to spoil the list, but Blade Trinity, this series gave me the ultimate reason to watch the entire trilogy. I'm kind of glad that we had all three included, but at the same time, we don't have Salem's Lot or Nosferatu. We have Blade Trinity with Jessica Biel, who could be one of the most attractive actors that does not need to be naked for me to really argue that. And Ryan Reynolds, who I could probably say the same thing about the male figure. Amityville Horror, him chopping wood in the rain. Guy's got some cum gutters on him. But yeah, this is the third movie in the Blade saga. And it's so good that they're starting over.
Shit! I've been cut already?
About a decade and a half later. Maharshallah Ali, the best of luck in replicating Wesley Snipes. But yeah, this movie It's unfortunate. I'm trying to think if this movie wasn't on the list, if I'd even have watched it. And that's a very big what if, because I've heard from multiple people that it's bad, it's the worst of the three. So I had lowered expectations going into it, and they were met. It's so strange. I don't know what it is about the early 2000s and movies that take place in Europe and dance clubs that appear to be where all the gnarly shit happens. I was expecting Rammstein to be playing at one of these nightclubs, but that's XXX. But yeah, short story long, unfortunate end to a decent trilogy. Number 25, Fright Night Part 2. The original Fright Night Part 2, not Fright Night Part 2 to the remake, which features...
Pardon my tense.
It's the only movie that has Fright Night in the title that we didn't watch. It's a perfectly adequate sequel to 1985's Fright Night. When you consider the original was yet another film with a bit of a twist on the Hitchcock Rear Window angle, like I said earlier, the original Fright Night is Rear Window but vampire, and this one is a bit more vampire traditional lore, with the exception of rollerblades, of course.
Blades of Steel.
Young kid and a seductress. We have some interesting age gaps in this list if you consider that vampires are immortal, but it's a decent sequel. It is certainly not anywhere near as good as any of the other films titled Fright Night, although I have not seen the one with Lila.
Pardon my tense.
So out of the three I've seen, this is my third favorite. Number 24, The Howling. So I talked about being prepared for letdowns. This movie is the polar opposite, where everybody and their mother told me that, oh, you need to see The Howling, it's brilliant. So much so that I did a last minute swap. Well, considering how many people have said that The Howling is like werewolf must watch movies, I did an audible and threw it back in and took Trick or Treat out. And I kind of regret that. You guys hyped it too much. I'm trying to figure out what it is about this movie that people constantly throw it up against An American Werewolf in London. Like, they came out around the same time. And An American Werewolf in London is legendary for a number of reasons. The effects work, it was unique. The twists and turns and jump scares. The Howling, I don't understand what the hype is. Again, first time I watched it was for this series, so I don't know, maybe too much time has passed for me to give it the proper respect that people gave it growing up with it, but it just didn't ring any bells for me. 23, Dog Soldiers, yet another of my protected picks. These last two movies were my selections to be locked in, and they're in the bottom third. It's quite evident that I hate myself. But again, another movie where Dog Soldiers, if you're doing werewolves, you gotta have Dog Soldiers. And I will give it credit that what I know of people in the Scottish Armed Forces, not much different than the American Armed Forces, just replace baseball or hockey with football. For you Americans, that means soccer. Really low budget. The effects work. It just didn't look right. It was dark a lot, which, you know, in the horror genre, sure, that works. But for the third act, when they go to the house, rather easy to figure out where everything was going. And I hadn't had the movie spoiled. I just knew what's going to happen from here out. It's got slasher tropes in a werewolf movie where people just get picked off one by one. Interesting twist. That's what these 31 movies are, by the way. Just an interesting twist, unique ways to get vampires and werewolves in movies, and a couple of traditional werewolf and vampire movies. Dog Soldiers is an interesting war slasher film with werewolves. The hype was far too much for me, and it didn't match that. 22, Ginger Snaps. Another movie that's probably more geared towards a female audience than a male audience. And I always see werewolf movies as a bit of a metaphor for puberty. And it really, really comes through on a movie like Ginger Snaps. The effects are, in my opinion, slightly better here than Dog Soldiers. I mean, I understand using darkness for fear and horror and tone, but American Werewolf in London, that transition effect is well lit. And Ginger Snaps, I'm not saying that Ginger Snaps is anywhere in the same ballpark, but yeah, unique movie for the female audience. Not that it's specifically for female audience, it just, I don't know what I'm saying. Number 21, 30 Days of Night, another of the movies that I've only seen for the first time in these last couple of weeks. Even though it's 21, I quite have a decent time with this. This list, for the most part, from, I don't know, 25, 26 up, are decent movies as far as I'm concerned. Just it's personal preference. And 30 Days of Night, for a film that I saw for only the first time, had a unique taste. Considering that the vampires are just vicious in this movie, is something that I quite enjoyed. No real star power in this movie. It's just all about the dude from Disturbed. It's not the dude from Disturbed, but an interesting take on the vampire genre. Quite vicious. I'm trying to think of if this may be the goriest in the 31. It's probably up there for me, maybe top 5 goriest of the 31. Number 20, Van Helsing. Yes, I listed Van Helsing higher than a bunch of movies that some of you swore up and down by.
Every single scene. Every single scene. We got snapping pussy.
This is my list of preference, not my list of quality. I have fun with Van Helsing. The CGI has dated awfully. I'm well aware of that, but I just have a fun time with this. There's nothing else I can say to defend this. I mean, go watch 2017's The Mummy and then tell me, would you like that? Russell Crowe's Van Helsing? This is fun, this is silly. This is Fast and the Furious for the Gothic cinematic universe. Number 19 is Teen Wolf. Another interesting take on a coming-of-age movie, except it's Michael J. Fox as a werewolf. In perhaps the silliest, I mean, this is a movie that they just absolutely capitalized on the fact that Michael J. Fox was huge. I don't know if this movie gets made with anybody else, even though they made a sequel with Jason Bateman, and, you know, do you remember that movie? Me neither. It's fun, it's silly, exploring what teenagers would do in a werewolf type scenario. A lot less of the carnal nature of werewolves and a bit more of the Marty McFly doing surfing on a van, using his powers to order a keg of beer. That scene still gets me. I saw that when I was a kid and freaked the shit out of me, but this movie's silly. Vampires play baseball to blend in with the thunder and lightning, and teenage werewolves are really good at basketball, even if they're 5'3". Number 18 is Daybreakers, another one that I only saw for the first time for this list, and it felt a little World War Z-ish. Again, I'm retroactively comparing some of these movies that were out before the things I'm comparing them to, but I had a rather decent time with this. I compare it to World War Z because this movie makes vampirism more like a virus. Bah, we can handle it. Just put a mask on. Take a vaccine. We're all okay with that. We're fine. This will never happen. Number 17, the Fright Night remake with the criminally lost far too soon Anton Yelchin, who does a fantastic job in this movie. And it takes the original, but this is a bit more serious than the original Fright Night, and that's fine. It's different enough, yet similar enough so that you feel like you have two totally different things that feel familiar. And I actually buy Colin Farrell a bit more as a charismatic dude without needing to speak than I do Chris Sarandon, but again, The remake is a bit more serious in tone. And number 16, we have Interview with a Vampire, perhaps the most homoerotic movie on this list. Another movie with age discrepancy. A very young Kirsten Dunst gets made a vampire, but this movie's all about TC and Brad Pitt being loyal friends that are stuck in Louisiana. When I think effects, I think werewolf movies. And again, I'm just forever thinking of the transformation from American Werewolf in London. But some of the effects in Interview with a Vampire are quite noteworthy. When Tom Cruise is just all gnarly and burnt up, it's quite good makeup. Movie's almost 30 years old now. And this is a movie, a rare exception, that I have a bit higher for the quality of it than I do the rewatchability. I'm just pouring out hypocrisy at this point. I would probably watch Twilight more than I would watch Interview with a Vampire, as horrific as that sounds. I don't know why. Brilliant movie and some fantastic work from actors that you go back and watch it now, and it, probably at that point, with the exception of Tom Cruise, Christian Slater was probably the name in that movie. And you go back and watch it now and you're like, oh man, what happened to Christian Slater? This movie was the reversal hex for him. Coming in at number 15, all the way from France, get your reading glasses ready. It's Brotherhood of the Wolf. We had a bit of a discussion about whether or not this technically is a werewolf movie, and Bryan actually'd us because he was the first to watch it. And yeah, that's quite a spoiler. 95% of Brotherhood of the Wolf is to lead you to believe that the thing that they fear is werewolves. And there's a reveal that lets you know it's not a werewolf. And Monica Bellucci, I don't know, I don't know of a French movie I've seen that doesn't have Monica Bellucci in it. Anywho, interesting movie that I had to watch twice, once to read and once to pick up and follow everything that was happening while I was reading. And it's interesting what folklore, I don't know if you can call this folk horror, but it certainly feels kind of Wicker Man-ish slightly. That may be a terrible comparison, but it explores the what's behind the door, what's down in the basement, what's in the dark. And this movie does a really, really fantastic job of exploring that theme. And as Bryan so eloquently shits on, it's not technically a werewolf movie, but for 95% of the movie, you're led to believe that this big beast werewolf is tearing shit up in French talk. And only at the end do you find out that it's a lion in wolf's clothing, or a beast. It's still a beast. It's the journey. It's not the destination.
Every single scene. Every single scene.
We got snapping pussy. Oh, Bryan, never change. Number 14, Near Dark, the Catherine Bigelow directed, and this is a movie that did meet the hype. Again, a much better version of John Carpenter's vampires. Well, I guess it's like the polar opposite to 30 Days of Night, because they're mostly in like this desert area and following the lore of what happens to vampires in the daylight back before they sparkled. Interesting twist, and it's weird because there are some movies that people hyped up that I felt like it just didn't meet the hype for, reasons being there's stuff that came out in between the 20 years of these movies coming out and now that I like better. But again, the comparison I'll use for Near Dark is John Carpenter's vampires, and I'd much rather Near Dark. And Bill Paxton, fucking, come on. Number 13, going back to the comedy category, What We Do in the Shadows. So for those of you who are fans of The Office and that style of presentation, we have What We Do in the Shadows. Taika Waititi and the other guy. I'm sorry, I only remember Taika Waititi's name, and a lot of you are really going to be angry with me for that. But it's hysterical. If you can get yourself into the presentation, the structure in which they're telling you that story, it's hysterical. It's absolutely hysterical. A young Taika Waititi who's gone on to make brilliant movies and also ruin Thor. This movie really has fun with itself, and this is a sign of things to come with Taika Waititi, and I quite enjoyed it. Number 12, Blade 2. If I told you back when that movie came out that Norman Reedus would be a bigger name than Wesley Snipes, how hard would you punch me? Daryl's in this movie as a little pissant. I have one gripe, but again, we're in the top third at this point. Chris Christopherson being brought back kind of eliminates the stakes a bit, and Blade, somebody who is a vampire, who constantly has to keep himself at bay, a bit of a euphemism for addiction, because Blade always has to gotta hit that needle every now and again. They should have called this one Dope Sick. Number 11, Silver Bullet. This could be titled the Corey Haim 31 on 31, even though he's only in 2 of these movies. But yeah, Corey Haim, in the short span of a couple of years, made a werewolf movie and a vampire movie. And back before he lost his shit, and just a couple of years before Point Break, we have Gary Busey as the uncle who always does cool shit but is a bit of a fuck up. Interesting seeing him in that role, especially considering where his career would go. But this movie's a lot thicker than I remember it being watching it forever ago. Hold this thought, because I may have a little bit of a deeper dive on Silver Bullet, because there are so many different themes, and actually I'm curious to see what Bryan has to say about this, because I have notes and I don't want to spoil them yet. I guess I'm leaving a lot out for the debrief, which, I mean, let's call a spade a spade. When we hit it out of the park, we really kill it, so you all want to see that anyway. The debates and the debriefs, not the ranking of Lethal Weapon 2. Number 10, the first Blade, and I think Wesley Snipes was probably the first guy to be a badass and talk like this, because none of the Batmans did that before Blade came out. And, you know, Wesley Snipes doesn't talk like that regularly, but as Blade, he would put a little gruff in his voice, and this is how a badass in all black. Man, this movie screams the 1990s with people wearing all black leather and sunglasses. Between stuff like Blade and The Matrix, the late 90s, man, we were edgelords with black leather and sunglasses, huh? But some people think that Blade 2 is their favorite of the trilogy. I actually kind of dug the first one, and it never quite matched for me. And I miss the doctor, the pseudo love interest. Why wasn't she? You brought Chris Christopherson back from the dead, yet you left the doctor from part 1 out of the future ones. And I bought into their chemistry and her being slowly convinced about how important everything was. Even with a badass like this wearing sunglasses and all black leather. Speaking of all black leather, number 9, Selena Kyle in Underworld. Oh no, wait, that's Kate Beckinsale in an absolutely unbreathing outfit, relies heavily on the blue tint. And this movie is probably a good summary of this list, because it has both vampires and werewolves as natural enemies, and Bill Nighy as the fucking badass that he is. Fun action movie in that late 90s, early 2000s, people being badasses wearing all black. There are probably other movies that I think are better, but I just really, really enjoy some of the Underworld movies, and the first one is probably my favorite, and that's why it's here. Number 8, Thirst from South Korea, directed by Park Chan-wook. Brilliant and interesting take on vampire subgenres and what happens to a vampire if they go long enough without blood. The blisters and all that was quite unsettling, with a slight homage to The Invisible Man. I thought it was going one way, and it ends up going in a completely different direction. He's a priest who feasts on people who are in a coma, and then he like commits all of the sins and creates this Frankenstein-esque vampire who just does things as she sees fit. And again, another movie you could probably put into the addiction category. I now understand why so many of you told me that I need to see this. It probably isn't my favorite Park Chan-wook film, but a unique take on the vampire subgenre. And again, those blisters, yikes. Number 7, the original Fright Night. Seeing this again as an adult or recently hasn't really changed how much I love this movie. This is probably nostalgia speaking more than anything. This is a movie that I just absolutely love, and it's a surefire go-to for me. Rear Window, but with vampires, and it's made in the 80s, so it doesn't take itself too seriously. And of course, what dweeb wouldn't want to impress Marcy from Married with Children? Number 6, Renfield. In the comedy category, they intertwine Nicolas Cage into the original Universal classic Dracula movie, but it's Renfield's story, and it's funny. This could be the freshness of it all just coming out, but I just thought it was quite refreshing. Having a vampire movie from the Renfield perspective, not unlike Interview with a Vampire, but certainly much funnier. They did some unique things as far as visual storytelling is concerned, right down to a doormat and the AA-esque meetings. I gave it so much credit for giving us characters to invest in and then just killing them. Like, oh, granted, it kind of gets undone, but I bought it for long enough, and I'll take it. Number 5 is Bram Stoker's Dracula, my favorite film titled Dracula, although I haven't seen any of the Hammer horror movies. I was kind of pseudo expecting to watch at least one of them for this, but you guys wanted to see Abraham Lincoln kill vampires. Christopher Lee is rolling in his grave. Anywho, this is a movie that covers all criteria just completely, fivefold. Great acting, great movie. Francis Ford Coppola. The score is just incredible. It looks gorgeous. Gary Oldman just carrying that movie as Dracula. It plays into the seduction and the lust, and it gives you the polar opposite of just how much of a monster Dracula is. You see him in so many different forms. This is a gorgeous movie, and every now and again he reminds you that he was the guy who did the Godfather movies. This could be like a 5-way tie for first. Number 4 is The Lost Boys. Again, nostalgia playing into this a bit more than anything. Again, another movie from the 80s that gave you a different taste. Movies that were made in the 80s that were covering already done tropes did some very interesting things. I mean, them hanging from the bridge is just iconic, and of course, who can forget the Chinese food scene? Kiefer Sutherland as a bad guy, especially in the 80s, was something else. Those of you who only know him as Jack Bauer, Kiefer Sutherland as a fucking dick was incredible. And Exhibit A, The Lost Boys. Exhibit B, greased up saxophone guy. Number 3, Let the Right One In, the original. Again, get some subtitles ready. Young children, and one of them's a vampire, and she's out to protect her neighbor, who slowly but surely realizes that the girl that he is into is got some skeletons in her stomach. Having innocence explored in a vampire movie like this, and not like Twilight, mind you, is so incredible. So much so that they redid it and let me in. Not terrible, but certainly not the original, not the source material, and it is just absolutely brilliant. Yet another movie that covers everything with tone. When you Americanize certain international movies, you kind of tinker a little too much. International movies don't focus so heavily on the score to induce your emotions. They'll let the imagery and the story itself do the work for you. You don't have to be conned into feeling an emotion because you hear certain sounds. America is just a bunch of Pavlov's cinema goers. Number 2, An American Werewolf in London. The ultimate as far as werewolf movies are concerned. People were bringing up movies like, it's better than American Werewolf in London, da-da-da, so on and so forth. No. With all due respect, no. This movie is absolutely bonkers. It's incredible. Inspiration for 2017's The Mummy, where this bread is buttered, is the transition scene, which could be the best natural effects in a movie, in any monster genre. I still have yet to see something natural effects that rival the American Werewolf in London transition scene. It's just incredible. And it's also funny and still kind of dark at times. Grown man nude at a zoo, just hiding behind bushes. Really funny. Not everybody will find that completely funny, but werewolves don't wear pants. And number 1, my locked-in pick, because I needed to use.
We got white pussy, black pussy, Spanish pussy, yellow pussy.
I needed to use my most quotable moment from any vampire or werewolf movie ever, and it is Robert Rodriguez's From Dusk Till Dawn, written by Quentin Tarantino. And Tarantino wrote it because he gets to drink alcohol off of Salma Hayek's foot, okay? Quentin Tarantino is to acting what Tommy Wiseau is to directing. I feel fairly confident saying that. Brilliant writer, brilliant director. Not the best actor. Holy shit, this movie, you think you're going one direction. I remember watching this on cable when it first was on cable and thinking it was just Reservoir Dogs-ish. Then for the second act, it gets a little weirder. And then you have Salma Hayek, who's perhaps the most seductive, gorgeous looking scene and quite suggestive. See, you can show images without really needing to have nudity, and Salma Hayek just absolutely gorgeous with a giant snake around her neck, doing a very seductive dance. When I think of vampire movies, I think of lust and seduction and things like that, and that is certainly well covered here. I don't think of drinking alcohol out of somebody's fucking foot, but I digest. And then for the last half of this movie, it just goes apeshit bonkers. These people who think they're tough guys are suddenly in way over their heads. It's something that when you consider what I have at 5, 4, 3, 2, I respect the diversion, the left turn, the twist that much that I have it this high. And it's not just for the Cheech Marin pussy monologue. I really, as far as this subgenre is concerned, this is the movie I go back to the most. It's fun. Tom Savini's got a gun for a cock. That's I always kind of suspected that anyway, so I knew that. That is my number one, From Dusk Till Dawn, directed by Robert Rodriguez, written by Quentin Tarantino. You know that because he drinks off a foot. So there you have it. That is my 31, a rather diverse list. I'm certain that everybody else's lists are going to be so varied and different, especially considering each of us brought 5 movies with us to the table, and you guys voted on the other 11. So it'll be interesting to see where everybody lays up, and you're going to want to check out the debrief to see where we average out, because as a group, how do we rank these movies? Again, I rank these movies based on whether or not I want to rewatch it or what I would go back to. More often than not, 9 times out of 10, I've ranked this list on rewatchability. There's the rare few where I've ranked it on quality. Interview with a Vampire is something that sticks out very, very much in my head. I have it ranked that high. I won't watch it that often, but it's a movie that I know is quite good. What is your list? By all means, let me know down below. Open up a discussion. Don't be a dick. We're just having opinions. Mine are mine, yours are yours. Nobody's right, except about your own opinions. All of this is subjective. A special shout out and a thank you to the patrons of WILIscredia. If you like what you see and you want to contribute and support the channel, I welcome it and thank you. And of course, obviously, I thank my current supporters. You guys are incredible. You could also just support me by subscribing, coming back for other stuff. The thumbs up really helps me out, like a lot, guys. Smash that thumb. Let me know what you thought. Where we differ. Are we the same on any of our disappointments? That's important to me because I was really let down by about 4 or 5 movies with so much hype. But I'm interested to see what you have to say, and I'm dying to know how the debrief's going to happen, because I really think we're going to be at completely different spectrums. Be sure to check out Bryan LOMAX's list, CODY LEACH's list, and Sean Chandler's list. And whenever the Autopstream crew gets together for the debrief and see where the numbers lie for us as a group. I have been Charles, otherwise known as CP. Thank you for visiting WILIscredia.
Fuck you.